Hello and welcome to another session of Karen's Colours. I'm Dr. Karen and these are my colour conversations. In this session, we're going to look at part 3 of what most people miss about colour analysis. And in this particular session, I want to look at the colours blue and brown. We call those the organisers and the innovators in colour analysis. It's basically two different ways of doing things. So if you've been here before, then you certainly know what to expect. Otherwise, welcome, and hopefully by the end of this session, you'll know something you didn't know before, which is exactly why I'm presenting it. Well, let's just get straight into it, shall we? Now, as we already know from parts 1 and 2, humans are programmed to see colours and to take notice of them. And as a result of this, colour gives us information about objects, about situations, and also about people. In this image, we have a trio of brothers. They're all genetically linked to one another, but as we can see, there are quite a number of differences. And as a result of those differences that we see in their coloration, we can make some assumptions about them. Whether those assumptions are right or wrong depends on our further interaction with them. But all colours have both positive and negative connotations. And in order to recognise these different connotations, in order to use them in everyday life, we need to not only recognise them, but also to be able to give them names. And this is what we call the basic colour terms. These, as we know, form in a specific order. Now, we know that black and white are basic colours. Red is all about high emotional experiences in very early childhood. Yellow and green are about learning and memory. And now we get on to the next of those basic colour terms. In this case, blue always precedes brown. And when we look at what they actually represent in language and also in everyday life, we can understand why that is. Nevertheless, they frequently appear together in imagery, and in many ways, that imagery is linked to a certain amount of productivity, whether it be nature's productivity or that of humans. Now, of course, we don't really know what it is in early humans that caused them to recognize blue as a specifically separate color. But we can surmise that it has to do with the natural cycles of light and dark. In this image, we have bioluminescence, a phenomenon that sometimes occurs during certain mating cycles of aquatic species. The sky is also associated with the color blue, and it offers us a sense of openness and comfort. In fact, blue skies tend to make us uplift our spirits. Water links to satiation, to tranquility, and also to cleanliness. When we see or hear of running water, we not only associate it with those things, but we associate it with the color blue. Because water is often seen as something that is running, it is associated with ceaseless motion. And that ceaseless motion then becomes linked to concepts such as routines and repetition. When we examine brown, we find that the associations are generally with earth, rocks, and also with trees. Brown is also associated with hidden potentials. That is, we can use those elements, either rocks, earth, or trees, to form weapons and also shelter. This is a picture of a bark cabin that was created in the early days of Australian colonisation. But we still have trees being used in shelter even today. The use of brown is also associated with the hunting and hiding from various different either prey or those who would prey upon us. So brown is the colour that is very useful for safety purposes as well. And it tends to be linked to solidarity and also durability. Both blue and brown associate with routines and with innovation regarding any sort of survival practice. There is a need for reliability in the expectations we have of the ideas that are linked to these two colors. And of course, we can conclude then that blue stabilizes and supports survival, whereas brown tends to innovate and broadens the skills that we already have. Now, all of this is, of course, conjectural, but how do we classify the social standing within modern life? Well, of course, we have this idea of blue being associated with status and with power, with nobility, and with ideas of infinity. Blue is often used as a symbol for stability, conservatism, reliability, and responsibility. Blue ribbons are awarded to ideas of excellence. We also have blue as associated with protection, with safety, with being trustworthy and truthfulness. On the other hand, the social standing of brown is more associated with lowliness, with humility, meekness, and to some extent authenticity. That is, you are close to the earth, and that is where you will remain. The ideas of being grounded are associated with that ability to deal with earth and also with dirt. Dirt, of course, has to do with lower classes. So whereas blue is all about higher classes of people, brown generally is associated with lower classes of people. And this has led to concepts of those people being dull or slow, rigid, unyielding, having a reduced ego ability. And of course, these are all very highly racist origins of the ideas associated with brown. And unfortunately, they continue to link to ideas that we have about people when we see them for the first time and we see the color of their skin. It's an unfortunate experience, but brown does not seem to be able to shake off that image of lower class than the color blue. So what then do we make of blue as a concept in modern day? Well, it encourages trust and loyalty. It tends to soothe and relax emotions, which is why we tend to use it in places where we need to keep people calm. It's linked to wisdom and thoughtfulness. It also represents dependability, security, balanced outcomes, and peacefulness, which is one of the reasons why we tend to clothe certain professions within the color blue. Nurses and policemen, for example, are dressed in blue because they give the aura of this balanced outcome, security, and dependability. Blue tends also to give ideas about duty and responsibility, and it derives from the maternal role as a nurturer and protector. The ultimate, of course, is blue associated with mothering. So to summarize, in terms of symbols, blue is all about security, trust, loyalty, and responsibility. In terms of its effects on humans, it's about protection, about calming them down, about relaxing, and also about support. The positive connotations of blue are about confidence and peace and honesty and reliability, but there are also negative ideas associated with the color blue, and these are associated with its conservative nature, with its passivity, the fact that it often leads to forms of depression, and also its predictability makes it a little bit uninteresting as the color in ideas. So what then about the color brown? Well, brown is associated with experiments, with practices. Brown is all about learning by doing, repetition, and ensuring that there is an unlimited tolerance of failure. You just keep on trying. And hence, the farmer is one of the characters that is associated with brown that has to do with continual keeping on, keeping on. We continue to try and grow things regardless of the sort of weather that is thrown at us. There is a need to conceptualize some sort of outcome that is associated with brown. So there has to be an idea about what you want to achieve before you set about doing the work to achieve that. There is also stubbornness and conscious simplicity about the way in which we view people who are associated with the color brown. It derives from innovative use of limited resources. So people who are extremely practical, who are extremely innovative, often are associated with the color brown because they have no other options. So to summarize then, brown symbolizes reliability, stability, honesty, and comfort. And its effects on humans is to simplify, to protect, to ground, and to stabilize with both emotions and physical characteristics. In terms of positive ideas, it's all about appreciation, support, wisdom, and dependability. But its negative ideas are associated with brown being boring, dull, timid, and also so highly predictable that nothing ever changes. Now, we know that they are both associated with the ideas of work and productivity. So how do we compare them? Well, both are protectors. Blue tends to protect through nurture. That is, it looks after the young and also makes sure that things go along smoothly in everyday life. Brown, on the other hand, tends to project by example. Here in this image, we have native people who together as a group protect their water supply by teaching each other how to clean out the water collection points and also to maintain the wells for community use. Both blue and brown demonstrate reliability. Blue operates through routines. This is what we do, this is how we do it, and it would do the same thing over and over and over again. On the other hand, brown provides solutions. That is, we have a problem, what we have been doing doesn't work, so let's come up with something different that will allow us to resolve those. Now, these days, of course, the sorts of solutions that are provided come from our electronic media, particularly artificial intelligence. Both blue and brown provide outcomes of the sort. Blue offers familiarity and predictability. If you go to school, you know exactly what you can expect from the sort of teaching and learning environment that you are going to be subjected to. Brown, on the other hand, produces lateral thinking outcomes. In this image, we have the lateral thinking that has produced houses for the homeless, or housing for the homeless. We can't exactly call these pods houses that sit independently, but it is a solution to a major problem that is outside of the usual way that governments have in the past treated the homeless, which has generally been by incarcerating them or moving them on whenever they try to settle anywhere. Now, as we know, when we put colours onto our bodies in the form of clothing, they give out information about us. So let's now examine what happens when we put blue and brown together. The closer the colour is to the face, the more important it is in terms of giving out messages. The further away from the face, the less important it is about messages to others, but the more important it is about messages to ourselves, because we are the ones that can see the lower half of our body much more clearly than we can see the upper half. So if we clad our little mannequin here with a blue top and brown trousers, then the positive outlook here is that the blue indicates a need for control, quiet, and organization. And that is driven by the brown underneath, which is a development of ideas, a testing of plans, and a desire to accumulate specialized knowledge. On the negative side of things, of course, there are also associations with this combination. If it's a negative blue on top, it's all about feeling overworked, restricted, and underappreciated. And the brown below, the driver, is all about fostering secret plans and undermining others. In other words, you want to get away from things that do not please you, so that in the real world you feel quite put upon. What about the other way around? If the brown occurs closer to the face and the blue further away, then what are the sorts of inferences that we can make from this? From a positive perspective, the brown uppermost tends to suggest thoughtfulness, practicality, and a desire to innovate. And the blue below is all about being satisfied, organized, and pretty much unruffled by disruptions, In other words, you remain calm under all sorts of trying situations. The negative view of this particular combination is that the brown on top is all about feelings of isolation, distrust, and being non-committal about the results that you're going to achieve. The blue below that is all about being psychologically rigid, dissatisfied, and unemotional. So here we have two situations, one in which a person feels quite delighted about the things that they can accomplish because they're feeling calm inside and being driven by a desire to do something new. And the negative side of this is that there is a rigidity that prevents the person from feeling contented with whatever it is that they have accomplished, and therefore there is a tendency to not want to accomplish anything much. Now, both the blue over brown and brown over blue appearance happens quite frequently in the work situation. But what happens when we have both colors mixed in together? Here we have a positive outlook that is associated with somebody who is a steady inventor, someone who is able to produce new ideas, new ways of doing things over and over. They're also a fairly reliable communicator. Blue is the ability to nurture, not only through feeding and looking after something, but also being able to calm someone down through the use of speech. So the reliability of that communication means that there are honest and repetitive communications that have the ability to maintain some form of good response from the listener. They're also a fairly ambitious organizer. Someone who is in a positive state of blue and brown together will be someone who is able to create an environment that is well organized, but also rather ambitious in that it allows for innovation in the way in which that environment is presented. On the negative side of things, this brown and blue is the discontented servant. This is someone who has to do their duty but doesn't like the job. It can also appear as the overworked trades assistant, someone who is bound to do a particular job, again, dissatisfied with it, working too hard, not able to keep up. And it's also, surprisingly, the work-shy gossip, someone who would rather sit and talk about how much they're working rather than actually do the work. I'm pretty sure we've all found this sort of a person within our own work environments. So what then can we conclude about these colours? Now, when we consider the colour blue, of course, we associate it with the classic example of the Madonna, Mary, Mother of Jesus. Blue, in fact, is the most favoured colour amongst both men and women across the world. It has links to peace and familiarity, and it tends to suggest a situation of calm, of quiet, and honourability in the way in which people interact with one another. Brown, on the other hand, can be linked to the classic example of Sisyphus, the man who was continually doing his work by pushing a massive boulder up a hill. It's rarely a favoured colour across the world, although it does come in and out of fashion occasionally. It tends to link to authenticity and stability, and it also has ideas of independence, strategy, and determination associated with its use. Now, here are all 5 of the permutations of blue and brown together. I invite you to look at each of these in turn and determine for yourself who out of those 5 would you prefer as a co-worker and why? And which ones would you prefer not to have as a co-worker and why? If that's not an experiment to your taste, I challenge you instead to look out for the people who wear blue and the people who wear brown and the people who wear permutations of blue and brown in your daily life over the next week or so. Just observe them. What behaviors do you see? What do they do? How do they do it? And perhaps if you're really game, you might even try it yourself. Put on blue and see how other people respond to you. and how you carry out the duties that you need to carry out. And similarly, try it wearing brown. And let's just get an idea of how those colours influence not only our own behaviour, but also the way in which other people perceive us and how they respond to what they see. Of course, the conclusions for any form of colour analysis are pretty much the same. Actions and motivations can be deduced through a colour analysis. It's not just about what you wear, it's about your preferences, it's about the way in which you think about your life and how it fits into the lives of your community. Becoming productive human beings is all associated with this idea of either blue or brown. Blue are the organisers and brown are the innovators. And we need both of them in order to have our societies function in a way that enables us to be constantly moving forward and potentially improving our lives and the lives of those around us. It's because blue are the organisers and brown the innovators that we find that when we achieve our basic colour terms in their taxonomy, blue always precedes brown. You need to know what you're doing before you can alter it. And that's it for this session. I hope you've discovered something you didn't know about both blue and brown, and perhaps a little bit more about colour analysis. Next time, we'll be looking at some of the influences that cause us to become civilized. That is, what sort of participation and citizenship duties we have within our everyday lives. I may need to split that into 2 separate videos because there are 4 colours involved, but who knows? We'll see where we get on. All right, I hope that the colours of your life tend to bring you joy and happiness and all of the things that you want for yourself, for your higher good. Catch you next time. Bye.